I love superheroes. I've always loved superheroes.
How'd that get in there?
When I first started making this video, I realized that the thumbnail and the title give off the idea that this is a video about superhero movie fatigue. It's not, because I don't think it really exists. James Gunn explains it best.
What's happened is people have gotten really lazy with their superhero stories.
This begs the question, what is this video really about? Well, much to the contrary of the opening of this video, there was actually a time in my life where I stopped loving superheroes. Kind of. But first, let's take a trip down memory lane and talk about how I fell in love with superheroes in the first place. Now, some of my most formative experiences in the world of entertainment involve superheroes. Whether it be that fateful Saturday morning many moons ago that my father put me on to the absolute peak fiction that is Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, or the eventful cinema trip to see the very first Avengers film in my local Odeon, which is perhaps the grungiest cinema on the planet. En route to the cinema, I was walking down the high street with my uncle and his brother, or as I like to call him, Dad. And let's just say I knew very, very little about the film. They had to explain to my dumb 8-year-old brain that it was in fact a Marvel Studios team-up film. So just like any 8-year-old child, my first instinct was to ask an intolerable amount of questions.
What's your record for consecutive questions asked?
38.
But once I had all my gnawing questions answered and my bladder emptied, that sounds like someone else emptied my flat, it was time to see the Avengers. Walking out of those double doors, my life was changed. Now, I'm not going to waste your time explaining to you why the first Avengers film was so mesmerizing to an 8-year-old. You're not dim. Needless to say, it was the root of an obsession. I watched all the films, all the cartoons, I bought the merchandise. Eventually, I even discovered the absolute legend that is Eric Voss. All of this is to say that superheroes had undoubtedly become my jam. And then things changed, in many ways, because I became a teenager. As a teenager, I once cried when my mum caught me watching a Spider-Man cartoon. I think something that isn't spoken about nearly enough when it comes to adolescence and those teenage years is that feeling of being scared to show the world who you are. You're scared to be judged, scared to embrace yourself. Which is mental because we all know how loving and understanding teenagers can be. A recurring thing I've noticed in teenagers, not that I hang out with loads of teenagers, they're scared to display the true version of themselves to their friends, to their family, and the world at large. Whether it be their passions, their culture, or even their gender identity. In my case, I was scared to be watching a superhero cartoon. As a teenager, you were probably the most anxious you will ever be in your life, is what I thought, until I realised I can't say the word anxious, and I'm trying to be a YouTuber. So now I'm rethinking my whole life choice. Now, there weren't many things that were deemed cool when I was a teenager, except these bad boys. And let's just say superhero cartoons, for example, certainly weren't up there in the running. Now, this is not to say that during the heights of the MCU, that superhero films weren't deemed a little bit cool. But even then, if we're being honest with ourselves, superhero films were only considered cool by the cool kids in moderation. Because, of course, the first rule of being a teenager is be as nonchalant as possible. If you knew too much about the characters, or watched breakdown videos about a new release, collected the merchandise, now that was deemed too far. So as someone who did all these things as a teenager, I felt like I was left with one option. I must hide my terrible affliction. So that's about the midway point of my teenage years. I was midway through my double life as nonchalant Harry and superhero nerd Harry, and I came across this little superhero cartoon called The Spectacular Spider-Man. Now, this cartoon was often described as one of, if not the best, depiction of the web crawler ever made. Now, I already loved Spider-Man, I loved the Sam Raimi films, I was even a big fan of the Andrew Garfield films. So my number one goal in life became finding out a way to watch this cartoon with no one knowing. Because of course I couldn't allow for the sheer embarrassment of admitting that I wanted to watch a superhero cartoon. I know what some of you might be thinking, why don't you just rent it?
Rent?
But I didn't have a bank card, so this would have involved admitting to my parents that I wanted to watch a superhero cartoon, and it had gotten to a point where I couldn't even do that. Now I hear you devious little devils in the back. Surely there are more nefarious ways one could watch this show online. Now my parents had this little thing called parental controls when it came to our internet access. For one thing, and nothing else, this meant that I couldn't watch The Spectacular Spider-Man on a piracy site. What else would a teenage boy watch? However, one year on holiday, I noticed that the Wi-Fi there didn't obey the same laws as mine did back home. So I was probably the first teenage boy in history with unlimited, unfiltered internet access for the first time who typed in The Spectacular Spider-Man cartoon episode 1 full episode online. I was so fucking cool. Now I'm sure that everyone else had a good time on that holiday, but they definitely didn't have as good a time as this guy. Let's just say I watched Spectacular Spider-Man as quickly as humanly possible. However, on one fateful holiday night, I was watching this in the lounge on my tablet. I was so engrossed that I only noticed my mum coming over to peer over my shoulder at the last possible moment. And of course, my natural instinct was to turn it off and hide it from her view, because she couldn't possibly see that I was watching the Spider-Man cartoons. Obviously, all this achieved was make my mum think that I was watching something I shouldn't be. So what was the next stage of my master escape plan? I ran away hiding under the stairs, clutching my tablet as I've sat next to some old dusty washing machine. Unfortunately, my master plan had a flaw, because my mum just blatantly saw where I went. Eventually, after a lot of crying, I admitted and showed my mum what I'd been watching. Her reaction could only be described as pure bewilderment. So basically, I'd become so bizarrely ashamed of my love for superhero cartoons, because of what people at school may or may not think of that the sheer idea of even my own mother finding out was enough to make me have a complete breakdown. May I remind you that this is a woman who's always loved me unconditionally, and I thought the fact that I watched superhero cartoons would somehow make her disown me, as if it was the equivalent of taking Class A drugs. And people say I had a sheltered childhood. Now this is probably going to sound mega cringe, as is any sentence that begins with the phrase mega cringe. But god damn it, people, life's just too short to not be accepting of who you are and open in doing the things you love. Unless you're a nonce. And this is just something that teenage me never understood. He'd probably have a heart attack if he saw me boasting that we're massive nerd losers all over the internet. But you know what? In the same way he secretly watched Spectacular Spider-Man, I think he'd secretly be proud of us too. Anyway, I do think I found an apt way to end this video. Naturally, my love for superheroes has developed into a love for comics. I know what you're thinking, how could this guy get any cooler? On J. Michael Straczynski's run on The Amazing Spider-Man, there is this one specific comic book panel that I think is particularly relevant to this video. The specific moment I'm talking about is at the climax of this very important conversation that Aunt May and Peter Parker are having. For context of what the conversation has been about, Aunt May has just found out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. At this point in the conversation, Peter and his aunt are merely inches away from each other's faces. Aunt May says to Peter, "I have dreaded having this conversation." "I dreaded having this talk, Peter." "So did I," Peter replies. "But everyone has secrets, Peter, and after a while they weigh them down so much that you don't keep a secret inside your life anymore. You live your life inside a secret. We have to talk about our secrets, even if it's painful to the ones we love and respect. And for me, that's you, Peter. And if I am that for you, then I can live and die happy." Aunt May's a very wise woman, but then again, she's not real, so J. Michael Straczynski's a very wise woman. Or at least he writes very wise woman. So if there's one thing that I want you to take away from this video, other than the fact you've got a new channel to watch, it's that you shouldn't hide who you are. Superheroes taught me that. At least they taught me not to hide who I am from the people I care about. Because obviously these people have secret identities. But you know, that's still a good start.
Flashback.
And more importantly, as a teenager, you are probably the most anxious you will ever be in your life. Yes, I said the word properly.
End of flashback.